next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. What many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. It's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we're coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives.
Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the Central. Good evening in the Mountain. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Reparationist Perspective, bringing you those ADOCS, hot topics, and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote, socializing our suffering. I see you, Brian Johnson. I see you, Sam, a.k.a. Bill Colesi. And welcome one and all, each of you in Facebook, in YouTube. Thank you one and all for joining the live. Please like, share, subscribe. Turn on your notifications, family. We got a lot to talk about, and I am elated to have the very beautiful and professional Rosita Chatonda and Mr. Debonair himself, Brian Mullins, out of Chicago, to talk about the puckery. I've been MIA, y'all, because I needed a mental health break, because the puckery just won't stop with the agenda to ethnically cleanse ADOCS out of the very country our ancestors built with their lies. They want me to shut up. They want to censor me. They want to call me xenophobe. They want to call me a black identity extremist. And yet I rise. I'm not giving a damn about any of it. You can call me what you want with all of your agendas, like we don't see you trying to get rid of our people, to get rid of the justice claim. You're weaponizing everything against us. You've got the unmitigated goal to let the hardened criminals free in Chicago and all over the country due to the pandemic. Speaking of which, how in the world are unvaccinated being blamed for the vaccinated occupying the hospitals with COVID right now? Does anyone use the brain between their ears that God gave them? If I'm unvaccinated and I don't have the COVID, what the hell you're doing in the hospital with the vaccinations? So there's pandemics all over the place. Little Nas X is on the puckery. The government is on the puckery. The courts are on the puckery. And I want to welcome up my esteemed guest to help me unpack the bullshit. Introducing Rosita Chatonda and Brian Mullins. Stand by. Welcome, family.
Hey, how you doing? Hey there.
And unstoppable. Despite the agendas.
Yep.
Despite the censorship. Rosita, please share with my audience, you've been here before, a little bit about your background before I let Mr. Mullins take the mic.
Okay, my name is Rosita Chatonda, and I am an educator in District 299 Chicago Public Schools, or was. I am not working now because of what you talk about, the puckery. Is that what you call it? And that has gone on and has been going on since 2001. So we are really organizing teachers at this point to educate them in regards to what has actually gone on with the mass termination of African American educators that has gone on for the past since 1954, first time it happened, but this time around, it's been since 2001, Chicago being ground zero for school reform and the gentrification of urban cities, predominantly African-American school districts that then were used to those were used to gentrify our city and then to take that forward and inevitably gentrify the country. So we are here. That is what I do. And then I will introduce you shortly and show you my book that's coming out. That's a historical analysis of what happened.
Thank you so much, Rosita. Brian, if you could introduce yourself to my audience, I'd be so grateful.
Sure. I'm Brian Mullins. I'm a 52-year-old resident of the South Side of Chicago, born and bred, and I've watched our city go from have a strong Black presence into what we see today, which is basically a mess. And we have been systemically ran out of the city of Chicago and cities around the country. And so, we just want to paint a picture, try to bring some things together during these conversations to kind of show how the education and the housing and the political side and everything all really come together to create the mess, that we're seeing in our cities now. I started Citizen for Civic Education to educate people about politics, and the Illinois Black Contract Association to try to control Black labor, which I'll throw into this conversation of how it plays into contracts and sustainable wage jobs for Black folks across the country, especially in Chicago. So,
thank you so much for being here. This topic is so huge. It's hard to know where to even freaking begin. Let me start with the video I just saw, and then we'll let that dictate and govern the conversation relative to some very important articles that I've opened up with some major headlines about how we got to the Black on Black crime and murders in Chicago that are off the hook, especially since the Biden administration has taken office. So let me just share a little bit with you guys, and let's check your notes and we'll talk about it. Stand by.
People dead and 70 shot. The city's top cop is calling out the justice system and blaming the courts for skyrocketing crime rates.
We are arresting the violent offenders. The courts are releasing these people back into the community. There are over 90 people charged with murder have been released. That should be a headline in the city, and it's not. So be adversarial to the courts. Ask what the courts can do different. Rather than release violent people back to these communities to create an environment of lawlessness.
It's sad that common sense is seen as refreshing. Meanwhile, a former Democratic senator from California becoming the latest victim of the nationwide spike in violent crime, Barbara Boxer, revealing she was attacked in broad daylight.
I tried to cross the street and get away, and he slammed me on the back.
Okay, I really don't want to hear that story, so I'm going to stop it right there. What they're trying to do is blame the courts for releasing violent offenders onto the streets of Chicago as to why there is a rise in the Black on Black crimes and murders. And what I want to ask you two as residents of Chicago, why are they lying? Okay, first of all, there are enough nonviolent offenders to release due to the COVID than to be releasing violent criminals back into our communities. For me, it appears they're releasing the violent criminals to finish off and decimate the people or drive them out of the community before they start bringing in all the Starbucks on every corner. This is what it feels like, a setup. It feels to me like a setup to justify more funding for the police in an era of when we're trying to defund the police. So I need to hear from two people in Chicago that know better than me, because this is just what it appears to me. It's my made up story that this is all by design, that you would release violent criminals into the community, knowing about gang violence when you've got enough nonviolent offenders who were arrested for peddling weed that the states turn a profit on. So you're intentionally freeing violent offenders into the community in the name of the pandemic. And now they're just going around wreaking havoc to drive the rest of Black Chicago out before they turn it all white. Who'd like to speak on that?
Absolutely correct. Right. No. That's pretty much in a nutshell. We are seeing, I agree with you. We're seeing the tail end of a migration plan, gentrification out of Chicago that started back in, say, 1980. As I always use that as a good starting point, because there was a lot of movement taking place in Chicago at that point in time. Chicago was rocking and rolling. And then as the 80s progressed, we saw systemic changes in politics that led to educational changes and housing changes that got us to where we are today. if I could talk for a few seconds to get it going a little bit, we could add politics right to the mix. I think what we're also seeing is the left politics play out in Chicago, right? We have a tremendous left movement in Chicago driving policy with their ideologies that are not good for Black people, right? But we got all this mess going on in Chicago. We have a very big LGBTQ content. We got the Chicago Teachers Union that fund a lefty candidates, right, for office, and all this is creating a mess inside Chicago. So one of the things we are seeing is we're seeing something that seems like we live in a bizarro world, right? We are watching our state's attorney, right? We have right now, we got 92 people that are arrested for murder, like 880 people that are caught with multiple gun felonies, all out on house arrest, right? And now when you're out on house arrest, it ain't like the movies. As soon as the thing buzz off, they come chase you. You can go out and do what you want before. It's Chicago. They don't have that. They ain't even looking for you. We also have the very high unsolved murder rate. So only like 17% of murders are solved in Chicago, right? So we see them, to your point, they let a lot of people out of jail from COVID. We're changing laws daily to stifle the police in Chicago. So it sounds crazy because I'm 100% Black. I'm ADOCS, right? But to allow this crime to fester and to be part of it is what is to finish off what's left of Black Chicago, in my opinion. And it's funny because Black people play into it. They have us twisted around, right? So we look at it like it's positive, and then they look at people like us like we're wrong. And I'm like, no. Before Rosita go, because she's gonna get on this on the education. They mandated by law to give fifth graders condoms in Chicago public school. So now we got the LGBTQ education, sexual education, giving kids condoms. The governor just signed a bill yesterday saying you can have birth control over the counter without telling your parents. It's like this is a plotted conspiracy against our community, and we're trying to bring these things out. So we didn't even go into the stuff about the education. We're watching it fail from a historical standpoint.
Before you say that, I want to make a real quick comment to your point. Oh my goodness, it just left me.
It's a lot. Yeah, it is
it's
a lot.
A lot to process. Rosita, go ahead. Prayerfully, it'll come back. It was a valid point.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback off of what Brian just said. And I really talk about how education was a tool in making this happen. This started, Brian said, in the 80s, but in the 90s when Mayor Daley came in, who was really basically destroyed the Black community with policy. And for some strange reason, for 20 years, Black people voted him in, regardless to the fact that it was unbelievable. But that was the Democratic machine. Black people were indoctrinated to vote against their own interests. So that's how we got here. And they just voted Democratic no matter what. I mean, it didn't matter if he was going to tear up the whole Black community. He was abusive. He closed 100 schools. And 103, I believe. And people always talk about the 50 schools that closed under Rahm, but in reality, 100 and some schools that closed under Daley way before Rahm was mayor. And all Rahm really did was close 50 half-empty buildings because we had lost 100,000 African-American students as a result of the school closings that Daley did. Now notice, nobody knows about the school closings that Daley did because politically no one cared. The Chicago Teachers Union wasn't interested because at that point, Karen Lewis was not the president and no one wanted to run against Mayor Daley at the union. But when Rahm came in, as Brian said, a new caucus called CORE came in. And they were a political caucus. They changed the focus of the union from political or from membership to their protection to their members, service to political and community organizing. So their goal was to go and really change the political landscape to the left. So, I mean, to the extreme left. And so they started picking candidates and people that would move their agenda. And that's where the politics come in. So now we have a Chicago Teachers Union that's a political machine. And they're moving basically against our community 24 hours a day. They're also very, very good at masking what they do. Just yesterday, I saw a post how they're really indoctrinating young Black parents to fight against going back to school. Why? Because their teachers don't want to go back to school. Our union used to be 18,000, maybe 16 to 18,000 Black teachers. Now we're down to 4. So we don't have African American teachers for the most part in the schools. And when the COVID happened, those teachers are not interested in coming back to the classroom. Now, how can I make that happen? If I can get Black people to turn on themselves and turn on their children through indoctrination, because that's what they're doing, I'll let them fight the fight. So they'll go out based upon something they heard on the news, and they'll fight the fight. And they will work against their own children, and they will have their children sit out while people sit at home and make $80,000 and $90,000 a year babysitting their kids.
Right.
So this is what we have in our community with the indoctrination. It's unbelievable, like what happened with Daley and what happened in the messaging to our community. Our community in Chicago, we have a real problem with self-hatred and self-disrespect. So if I come to them as a Black person and tell them, look, this is what's happening. For instance, when the union busting bill was signed by the caucus, Karen Lewis was there, I would go to the House of Delegates and tell the teachers, did you read the bill? Everyone's getting ready to be fired on the South and West side. Well, they said I was crazy. As soon as they went on strike, Rom came in, closed 50 schools, and fired them all. So that's what I saw when I read the bill, because they had removed their seniority in economic layoffs, meaning anytime Rom wanted to say there was no money, you went straight to the unemployment line. So that clause that protected you from being fired was removed. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, he's getting ready to refire everyone, because the union has helped to remove their protection. And then what the union did was begin to message to our community, put Black people out there in blackface. And they would sell the community on this horrible, horrible caucus of the Chicago Teachers Union. They get a Black person up there. And recently, there was a fight between, they're always fighting with the mayor. And they always pit Black women against each other. So recently, one of their people that they funded, who is now an alderman, got into almost a physical altercation with the mayor, because I don't even know if she knows this, but she's been put out there to fight other Black people. That's what they do. It's like we're on a plantation. And so I'll let Brian say what he had to say, and then I'll come back.
Well, yeah. I remember what I had to say. The Democrats are great about the conditioning of ADOCS to get the vote. Mm-hmm. And now that we have awakened, now that we've got grassroots speaking out all over the new Black media, there's all types of censorship that is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To remove our voice, because we were gaining momentum. And so it is amazing to me how we, by and large, buy into these white racist tropes about our people, especially our poor. to play into the agenda of the KKK, which runs not only the police departments all throughout the country that are then placed in our communities where we've been neutralized economically, but they run every level of government as well. And they're on both the Democrat and the Republican sides of the aisle. Biden, Jim Crow Joe, being one of them. And it blows my mind how non-data driven our people are. The ones that are watching know something is wrong or they're in the movement. Shout out to each of you. I haven't gotten a chance to greet you. But I'm speaking to the conscious. I'm speaking to most of the ones who already know something is either wrong or they know what's wrong, and they tune in and they do their best to like, share, subscribe, turn on the notifications. But then you'll have ScrewTube messing with the algorithms, people writing me they're not getting the notifications, and then you got Facebook that just dismantled all of my pages. That's why I had to recreate myself in Facebook. And I literally have to make sure I've got a comrade like you, Brian, or you, Rosita, in common with the very people that want a friend request, because I don't know who is doing it. Who in the world? When your pages are public, anybody can see it, and they're reporting it to Facebook. You go on the list, and then eventually, after so many times that they put you in Facebook jail, and you're sitting up, I'm in jail, I'm back, I'm free. No, every time that happens, it's counting against some type of algorithm that eventually is going to disable you and 4,500 people who were following you. And this is what they're doing with the help of the Democrats. And like Trump or hate him, he wasn't weaponizing immigration against us, and he wasn't letting free hardened criminals to run and shoot up everybody in our communities. He may not have done a damn thing for us, but he did not set us back like we've been set back the first 7 months with Biden and Cop Obama in office. So this is what they do. They're very good with trying to point fingers at the overt racist. So we will run out and vote 87% to give them a trifecta, and they get in there and don't do a damn thing to include us in terms of social justice protections and economic inclusion, and are right now trying to kill the reparations fight. But for those of us that are still standing and still showing up and still putting in work in the social media spaces to make this relevant. So how we move in 2022 is going to be the message you send to the Democrats, because let me help you with something. They are opening up this country to illegals, giving them the farm so they don't need your vote. And I know you say, well, the Hispanics are conservative. Bullshit. Don't believe the hype. Our numbers went up 22% in the last election, as did theirs. So as they get goodies in citizenship, they're going to work with who's going to give them the most goodies. Trump was trying to give their asses a wall. And that's why the news media co-opted with the Democrats to demonize him while y'all got in bed with an even worse devil. There is nothing that good has come of the Democrats with a trifecta for ADOCS. We are being more and more ethnically cleansed by the day. He has signed no executive orders and wants to play this game with the Voting Rights Act, the reparations, the HR 40, all of it. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to end qualified immunity. Instead of making an executive order, he's leaving it to a divided Congress that he knows 8 of those Democrats just voted down $15 an hour minimum wage, which, oh, by the way, does not get you a home with a median national price of $340,000. And now he's upholding the bullshit by the damn Supreme Court ending eviction moratorium this weekend. So you want me to believe you give a damn about my Black life, by giving me diabetes through Krispy Kreme giveaway every day of the year and giving me weed habits and insisting that the federal employees get vaccinated while allowing the eviction moratorium to end. Make it make sense, family. I'll take a breath. Brian, take it away.
Well, again, it's a lot. We have stuff been coming at us historically. It's currently, it's every day. You look at the news and here comes some other shots taken at us. So, you know, it's always good. And what I try to talk about is to get people to understand. I mean, it's deeper than this short conversation. We definitely have to come back to learn the stories. And these stories go nationwide, but to understand how we got to where we're at is very important. We're on a convergence in Chicago where we had high-rise housing projects. They tore down the housing projects, displacing about 100,000 people and families. Those were the same families and students that went to Chicago public schools. They were then dispersed throughout the city of Chicago. At the same time, the federal government locked up gang leadership, which means it was just utter chaos when you move 100,000 people from high-rise projects into stable Black communities, right? So this is all part of the destabilization of our communities, right? And then this, of course, then you had drugs coming into the flow at that point in time. And as you continue to close schools and keep utter chaos going on, crime was relevant in the 90s. So our crime rate, even though it's more visual now because of social media, it's been bad in Chicago. It's more random in Chicago. So what we see now is it's everywhere. Whereas before it was calculated areas and groups of people, you know, shooting each other. But the numbers are probably not dipped off of each other. But again, you can calculate the closing of schools and the tearing down of projects 20 years later. These are the children that were in Chicago public schools that were displaced. This is who is now committing the violence in our communities. Now, I don't blame them. I blame the system and blame what happened to them, right? But I'm not going to ignore that this is the same group of people, because that's what's so crazy. To your point, you talk about politics, and politics is heavy, especially when you talk about Chicago. Everybody we talking about, this is where Barack Obama is from. So Barack Obama was president for 8 years. He brought policy nationwide, DACA. You got Arnie Duncan and failed education and the closing of schools and the failing of Black students and Black teachers being fired nationwide. All this starts in Chicago, and they master it in Chicago through the University of Chicago Crime Lab. They have a crime lab. Real quick, this is amazing to me. I never knew this until recently. So they got a crime lab in Chicago, University of Chicago. They get all the studies, they get all the money. They've been studying Black folks for decades here. They sit in the middle of the South Side of Chicago in the Black community, right? And so they also have crime labs at major universities around the country, right? Which I never knew. That's something new, right? All studying Black people. Under the guise of, how can we help you poor Black people? We want to study you so we can help you. They get hundreds of millions in funding. I mean, billions of dollars endowment, right? Then I found out John Rockefeller started University of Chicago. I'm like, oh, they dirty, right? So all this is a continued plan. And so we were talking real quick, I'm going to dip in the labor. So I think we're on the same page that with reparations coming from a federal level, and what we call all local level stuff is equity. What we want is give us what we deserve on our percentages in our cities or where we live in our neighborhood. But in Chicago, I mean, you're talking about collective about $80 billion state, county, and city governments, collective, things. So we asking for $30 billion to go to this certain geographic area. You know what I mean? So
okay, Brian, I want to get in there for a minute and because something and clarify some of the things that Brian talked about with Chicago being ground zero, because what I believe Chicago has the largest, or Cook County, number of African American ADOS in the country. So basically, we're like the test lab, grounded. If you can get it done in Chicago with Black people, you can take it around the country and it should work. So that's what Mayor Daley and that's what Arnie Duncan and them decided to do. So when they started with school reform and moved it forward, because in some, like in California with Brian Corwell, he was supposed to be on before, and we're going to try to get him on, and Jeff Kennedy out in Washington, Nikita Lamore out in Massachusetts, Sharonda Adams in New Jersey. These are cause people that are all over the country that are experiencing what we experience here in Chicago. It isn't as developed. They might have just come to their city, but this is why we're warning them. If you do what they did here in Chicago, you are going to have the same kind of violence. You are going to have everything is going to be the same. When we look at the children that Brian talked about that were in the projects, I worked in Daniel Hale Williams Ickey's housing project. They came in 2001 and closed our school just one day out of the clear blue. There were 3 prison buses outside of the school to make sure that we didn't protest. And if we protested, then they let us know we were going to jail. So the way that they did the closings, I knew it had nothing to do with education. And I remember that day going up and telling the teachers they're gonna use test scores. So we have to be careful. They're gonna use test scores for the justification for gentrifying our whole community. So that's what they did. And I wanted just to show a little bit of this because I don't know if you can see it, but it will be out soon. This is the cover of my book, Drinking from the Whites Only Fountain in the Air of the Obama Legacy. And it talks about what happened. On the cover, you'll see a picture of the Atlanta teachers. And look at how education and testing is used to gentrify, incarcerate. Now, these teachers were charged under the RICO law as like Al Capone, organized crime, because they said they cheated on a test. And what that simply meant was that they succeeded, their students succeeded at mastering the test, which is a no-no. And a lot of people don't realize that. When Black children succeed, look at what happened with Simone. When she went, it happens all the time in different layers in the school system. Once you prove that Black children can succeed, you may be arrested, you may be brought up on charges because it really isn't supposed to happen. And I've been in schools where I was getting 2 and 3 years growth, and they said, well, we have to retest the children. Fortunately for me, or else I might have been in jail too, the children did better. The students did better with the second retesting. So they were like, okay, well, maybe they really do know something. So once we prove that our children can learn, once we remove the stressors, because most of our children are dealing with a lot of stress. So if you are creating an environment in your classroom that alleviates that stress and deals with the real issues that they're facing, our kids do very well. That's a no-no. And so you will go to jail like the Atlanta teachers if you prove that Black children can be successful, that their scores can be high. I remember being at a school and I was the lead math science coach. And when I started there, I had one student with the stay 9.7, only in the entire building. So the next year, our school was the last one on the list as far as unachieved, not being able to achieve. And the next year, I had 29 nines, which is unheard of, 29 eights, and 57 sevens. So it removed us off of probation. And when I did that, I lost my job because I was tied to probationary schools. See, there's no reward for doing good things. The only reward is for failure. So when they moved me to the other school, and they started one of the Black principals, I went for an interview and he said, I know those rugrats over there did not achieve scores like this. Now, this is an African American principal talking about a school of poor Black children. And they asked, well, how do you do this? Because our children have all kind of issues. It's not that they can't learn, it's that they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. And I mean, who would want to worry about learning when you're coming to school dodging bullets? Trying not to be beat up, molested, coming, and all these other variables that affect the ability for them to learn. So if we do well, then we might end up in jail. Like the teachers in Atlanta charged, some of these teachers got 14 years because they did well on the test. Some of them did admit they cheated, but even if we do well, they simply change the rules, like they did with Simone. If we get all 100s, they're going to change the test and change the rules. And so this goes on in every aspect of our life. And this is why we must get reparations for our young people, to repair the damages, to equal the playing field for them. And I just wanted to say that. And also, just to say quickly, my book will probably be out in the next month. It's a 450-page documentary that honors the history of ADOCS educators from 1600 till today. It tells their story, which has never really been heard. And it tells the story of, this is the second time that all the Black teachers were fired, once in 1954. And this is why Dr. King, when you were talking about Dr. King and the leftists, Dr. King himself described what we call liberals today as moderates. And he was very specific about that he would rather deal with the Trumpian kind of personalities when dealing with white supremacy, because they're very slick. And they're just as racist, but they have this very slick way of making you feel like they're not. And so when he was with the NAACP and left, he gave the organizing to the SCLC. He was the one who brought back the organizing to the Black church, because he felt that the liberals would, well, first of all, they were using him. And little young, smart young man, and you know how they do, they're still doing it today. They grab our youth who are 20 years old and use them to push their agenda. But of course, Dr. King was a little bit smarter than the ones they have today. And so he left from being under their control and took the organizing to the SCLC and gave it back to the Black church.
And if I could jump in
here, let me jump in. Then, Brian, I want to ask you a question real quick, Rosita. Either that you get put in prison for showing off about the brilliance of these very oppressed ADOCS children in our communities, or they simply just get rid of you 200,000 strong throughout the country. You'll get fired or you'll get jailed for showing off about the brilliance of ADOCS, because that's not the way institutional systemic racism works. The design is to replace us with Black immigrants. And I just got into a beef with someone in Racebook talking about how peaceful things are in Africa, while they fight and clamor to get into the country after having sold us into slavery to get the affirmative action that we no longer benefit from. Exactly. And that's why we got this huge racial wealth gap in LA. From a 2004 to 2014 LA Color of Wealth report, you can download the PDF. The woman that came for me was trying to act as if the materials being dated that I was cited what didn't dignify a conversation or an exchange. I implored upon her to Google, because they only do this every 10 years. So you probably won't see another Color of Wealth report until they have finally successfully ethnically cleansed us up out this piece by 2024, the next election cycle, or at the very least will have permanently made us fourth-class citizens in the country our ancestors built with their lives, and the permanent anchor of this country with 3 Ks, capitalism with 3 Ks. But I was just sharing with her as they talk about the peace of Africa, y'all struggling on lines to get into this country for the come up. And down here, based on that Color of Wealth LA report from 2004 to 2014, Nigerians were 60,000 liquid to ADOCS 200 liquid. When you look at who they are disproportionately executing by state sanction, it's not in the neighborhoods where you're worth 60,000. It's in the neighborhoods where you're worth 200. Okay, when they sit up here and do redlining and preschool to prison pipelines, the highest rates of homelessness, the highest rates of unemployment and underemployment, they're not doing it to the Nigerians or the Black immigrants who come over here after selling us into slavery and come up on the backs of the affirmative action intended to make us whole that we no longer benefit from. And then you want to brag about how much peace you got in Africa while coming over here and treating us just like our white oppressors. Brian, I'm going to take a breath, but I have a question for you. Sure. Why in the world is it practically 30-30-30 white, Hispanic, and Black in Chicago, and yet our unemployment rate is damn near 15% or higher, while the Hispanics, whom we should not be in a race to the bottom with, is around 4%?
I can tell you that part of it goes again, Chicago being ground zero and coming in this world of Barack Obama politics. We have never been the forefront of anybody's thoughts. So, you know, when you talk about labor, when you talk about immigration, right, they're coming into the country, replacing us as labor. And that can be in the construction trades. They're bringing teachers in from other countries. They're bringing engineers. What makes education and the arguments Rosita is making so important, if we now know today that we are not turning out our children cannot compete with what we know the future is, which is even now, right? Then what are we doing with education, right? So $10 billion a year comes to Chicago public schools, 10 billion, right? And to Rosita's point, 80% of the teaching force is white and Hispanics, which means their households are getting money, right? They get money, they get nice paychecks out of the fail of our community. They do it over and over, but it's a labor issue. So we are 20% of teachers in Chicago, 12% of police, 12% of fire, and 3% of construction. If we just got those sustainable wage jobs to take care of our families to $60,000, $70,000 a year, to stabilize our own selves, just equal to our percentage in Chicago, which is 30%, right? Give us 30% of that, 30% of the contracts at 80 billion, that's about 20 billion into the economy of Black Chicago. Now, why don't that happen, right? Because Obama, well, look, see, Obama in Chicago, it's a longer, deeper story again. Obama is hooked up with the Daley family, right? And so their whole goal is to milk the resources of Chicago. So Rosita started telling some of the stories about school closings. We even got, so Daley's the family who now have the parking meters, right? They sold off the parking meters to Chase Bank, which his brother was on the board of directors. They got the tollway, the skyway, the parking garages. They sell off these public assets for private use. These are major players. So what I'm saying is Chicago is so deep, you have some deep-rooted stuff going on that triggers and plays out globally around the country and globally, but it's all centered around Chicago. And immigration, of course, and Obama is at the core of it. They estimate about 200,000 illegal immigrants are in Chicago. 200,000, 307,000 in Cook County. As soon as they are able to vote, we automatically lose because now we got to compete against a brand new voter block that just came in the door getting housing and money, and they happy to be here, and they go get all these jobs that you see that they. So the narrative you see how the mainstream media plays. They talk about all these jobs and how Americans don't want to work, how we're lazy, we want to stay on unemployment, because what they doing is setting up for the immigrants to come in to take those jobs, and then all of us are going to be out. And see, that's all happening right now, but they keep playing it up like it's something else that's taking place. So we got to be cognizant of that and fight along those issues because it's real.
And to your point, these immigrants are not just coming over here to take orange picker jobs.
Exactly.
These immigrants are being given the education under our affirmative action and the professional jobs to replace us. And the reason why you need to be concerned is as Chicago goes, so goes the nation. As California goes, so goes the nation. We are now down from 16 to 5%. I've shared with you guys on prior shows how they replaced every ADOCS in the Wells Fargo banks, replaced us with immigrants, got them to steal and rob from the customers to help the shareholders' bottom line, and then fired 5,500 of them. Now they're going to be able to get a big come up on those lawsuits. All the while they gave the CFO, John Stump, $148 million golden parachute, you see. So it is all by design of institutional systemic racism to make us the anchor of the country's capitalism that they killed and stole from ADOCS, okay? This is what is happening. It is a clear-cut agenda while folks like you, to your point, Brian, are trying to make it seem with these agendas that we don't want to work. Well, let me help you with something. When you ain't got no social capital at the table that looks like you, that can truly hire you. I'm not talking about those black, white supremacists that are put into high positions to deny you while giving opportunity to immigrants and white folks.
Exactly.
When there is no social capital at the table, you don't get the job. I don't care how degreed you are. You can speak Spanish as fluent as Pedro. You can have job experiences in every industry known to the born world, and they are not hiring your black ass. So please miss me with it, with this lazy bullshit, white racist trope that black Americans, ADOCS, American descendant of chattel slavery, are lazy, shiftless, no good, no count, when you clearly see the agendas.
Yeah.
And you are as bad as they are when you come for me in my Facebook feed trying to defend the bullshit. I'll take a breath.
Okay.
Real quick on that. Look, in Chicago, and this is probably around the country also, this is how deep it is. Okay, they bring in people in Chicago to get high profile jobs, police superintendents, head of education, head of housing. You know, they'll migrate you in. You'll move in Chicago 2 years ago. They put you in some not-for-profit, and you come run for elected office. These people have no historical ties to our historically black city. So in Chicago, they just like immigrants to me. I'd be like, y'all the immigrants in Chicago because you are not historically here, but you have control over what our neighborhoods look like or what our schools look like or how our community is going to be policed. But guess what? They come, get these high salaries, fail, and leave after they tear shit up all the time. I said that's another element of a layer of craziness we got to deal with as ADOS here, right? Because not only are they black immigrants that come in over us, but again, it could be ADOS from other parts of the country. So you get people from Ohio come in and then they be over the school system. They don't give a damn if these black kids fail or not. They don't know any of them. They didn't grow up with them. And they do that systemically.
And they don't understand the culture.
Right. That's part of the plan, though, is they know that's what's going to happen. So then people like Rosita and I have to fight them first, right, in order to even get to the problem. And then everybody like, oh, y'all just haters. Y'all just hate everybody. I'm like, no, I just hate y'all. You know, continuing to fail. And so let me say one more thing. We talk about one thing we got to touch on is class. Class is one of the biggest things we don't talk about. Look at Chicago. We got Rosita started on a great story. We got Jesse Jackson, Louis Farrakhan, Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan. We got all this supposed beautiful black love. Chicago is a fail for black, right? We got black first of all. I love my city, right? But I'm saying the perception of who I just mentioned. We watch, like she said, Jesse Jackson brought on the Rainbow Coalition right out the gate. You went sideways back then. I was too young to care at that point. But as a black people, we failed at that point. We let them go sideways. We should have went the other route, back to what Martin and Malcolm was talking about. Hey, they told us, right? And Jesse and them said, no, we're going to keep going this way. And we ain't left that train plantation yet, right? Now, some of us have, but the majority are still caught up because the players are so diabolical. So you can have Barack Obama's preaching all this stuff, but there's nothing in front of it, behind it. I mean, it's just smoke and mirrors to everything. And so they continue to do that at a local level, at a national level. That's the biggest thing is get out of that single voting thing. And so the last point, we are 70% of Black Chicago or Black across the country don't vote, right? So instead of trying to fight with the 30% of people that won't vote Democrats, we need to find and talk to the 70% of ADOS who are disengaged and say, hey, y'all, this is time for us to get off the pot because they're coming for us, not for everybody, for us, this 70%. And I think that's the political strategy, is to organize under our own tribe of ADOS, like everybody else is organized under their own moniker but us. We're supposed to be for everybody. That has to drop in politics, so we're out. So,
and I just want to
real quick. Now the rainbow is LGBTQIA. Thank you, Jesse Jackson.
Absolutely.
Rosita, I have a question for you because we're coming on the hour. Don't lose your thought. Black teachers were hit the hardest by the Chicago public school system. And yet we got this judge who said the layoffs did not discriminate against Black teachers. Could you please unpack the puckery?
Well, for this, and I hate to say this, if you understand the game that the CTU is playing. Well, the
Tell my people
CTU,
what the CTU is.
Chicago Teachers Union.
Okay.
Now, I organize what I call cause teachers. We're a group of African American teachers. We do advocacy for ourselves. We were once union members and we are not because we didn't get the protection we needed. So every time we try to move forward, like we have a lawsuit that we're doing now, the union will then come and try, because they have lots of money, and do something to silence us. They'll even get Black parents to speak on behalf of Black educators, but they will not allow the Black educators to speak on their behalf, not the ones that have been terminated. So they use the working Black teachers, like Brian is saying, to work against the fired ones. And then this particular lawsuit came out of our fight. So when the union decided that we kept complaining about, what are you doing about Black teachers? What are you doing? They went and filed a lawsuit, but the lawsuit they filed was for what we call turnaround schools. Now, turnaround schools is when you go in and you fire everyone, including the lunch people, everyone in the school, and then you rehire. What the union was saying was that was a Black teacher lawsuit. It was not. It was a turnaround school. Every turnaround school has teachers from all races. So if you file a lawsuit and say this is a Black, see, they just said it's a Black teacher lawsuit. It isn't. It's a turnaround schools lawsuit. But that's to appease us, to give it that name. We're fighting for African, but you're not, because it's a turnaround school. And everyone is at the turnaround school. White teachers lost their job at the turnaround school. Hispanics lost their job. Anyone that worked in that building, regardless of race, lost their job. That's what the judge said, and he was right. So if you're going, now what the union should have done was file a real lawsuit on behalf of Black educators to say that, like we're doing, to say that in the late 90s and forward, there have been 14,000 African American teachers terminated. But this union plays games because they know we don't read, write, and even the teachers don't read. They don't write. They don't even know what's going on. All they do is give you sound bites. And then the teachers don't connect the dots and say, hey, wait a minute, what about that? When I worked for the union, and I would go in, when they're really good at this because they got me. By me coming from a school where they closed, I knew when my school closed what was going on. No one else knew. And this was in 2001. So in 2008 or 9, I see these predominantly white socialist activists at the board meeting, and they're screaming and hollering at the Black administrators. And they're saying, why have you fired all these Black teachers? Oh, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, wow. they're the only people that know about this. So I think I got to go to their meeting. These white people are advocating for us and no one else will. So I joined their group, but it was all a facade. That was Karen Lewis's group. And so once they won, the week before the election, the CTU election, when they won in 2010, they went into court and they filed this lawsuit on behalf of Black teachers. It's in the Black Agenda report. The lawsuit, we never knew what happened with that lawsuit. When they won, I would go in every week and say, well, did we hear anything on the lawsuit? What lawsuit? And I'm like, oh, the lawsuit you filed on behalf of Black. We never heard another thing about that lawsuit. And then they were quiet. So then this is what they do. They filed about 8 or 9 lawsuits talking about they're doing something for Black teachers, and they've lost them all. They've lost every last one of them. So, but you get, when you file a lawsuit, you get to do a press conference and announce that you filed it, but they never go back and say what happened.
If I can
What
interrupt,
happened?
tell the story.
This one lawsuit.
That was your
and
thought, Brian.
No, I'm sorry. It goes to what Rosita's saying, because when she talk about this caucus, this is the core caucus. There are the unions, the teachers union and SEIU. They are the socialist communists. They fund the socialist communist candidates in Illinois. That's what make it relevant. They're the socialist communists that fund the Black Lives Matter movement and the social and political left in Chicago. That's how it's all tied together with the school and the teachers and the unions and this movement of politics and where we're going with all the foolishness, LGBTQ education, all the conjuring kids, all that is part of the same left communist socialist ideology that Rosita's talking about. That's the group she's talking about.
And the union fired all their Black educators at the union that worked there. The same thing. So they were working hand in hand. What they did was they hired school clerks, like a lot of Black school clerks. So when they come on TV, it looks like, oh, well, this white guy, Jesse Sharkey, is standing with all these Black educators, and they're not educators. They're school clerks or just people off the street, and they make it look like
you got a white teachers union president, a Black vice president who's on television all the time. She's the one always yelling and fighting on television, right? Telling her story. But the body who pay the dues are 80% white and Hispanic. They don't give a damn about our Black kids. So you got the union representing, like, using Black children and the plight of Black Chicago as the force in the media to draw people's empathy to, but it's for the benefit of the members who are white and Hispanic on the back end standing behind them. It's 80% white and Hispanic in that teachers union. So, but you got a Black face, right, and a white Jewish president with a membership of 80% white and Hispanic teachers who fail our kids. And that's the narrative. We got to look at the news. So they be on TV, oh, we're fighting for the kids. I be like, no, you lie, get off your ass off the TV, because you're not, you lying. But the general public, and of course our people who think everything backwards, be like, oh, the teachers union cares about our kids. I'm like, no, they don't at all. What's wrong with y'all? And like, don't y'all see it? Make it so dirty. They had a strike. Jesse Sharkey went and met with the mayor. So you got the Stacey Gates and Jesse Sharkey. They was out meeting with the mayor, negotiate. Jesse Sharkey went up and met with the mayor and wouldn't let the Black girl even come to the damn meeting. This is real. They was all public. We sit there like, are you kidding me? You wouldn't let the Black girl come to the damn meet with the mayor. Next thing we know, they got a deal, of course, right? That's the Black girl out. Shit is real, but people act like it's not really happening, even though it's public and it's talked about, it's on the news, but we don't grasp what's really happening. This is just a maniacal agenda, and it's funded. And it's from national down, playing out in Chicago. The Obama Center is coming to Chicago. Chicago is being gentrified out completely. Obama is at the head of gentrification in Chicago right now. It happens to be coinciding with a big LGBTQ movement in Chicago and a displacement of ADOCS in Chicago. And it's not a coincidence. It's been part of the plan from day one. You know what I mean? And it's the plan they're playing out. And we try to, Obama Center is coming. in a big park in Chicago. If you don't know Chicago, it's a big Southside Park called Jackson Park. It's coming in here. It's gonna cut off and cut off a big part of Black Chicago, historical Black Chicago, connected to brand new $20 billion developments at Michael Reese Hospital and these other places of the city. You know what I mean? And it's just and everybody act like this again. This ain't a plan, you know. And we sit back and we keep losing. So it's frustrating to us because we like, what's wrong with y'all? They don't even hide it. And I guess that's the key, right? You tell Black folks for some reason we don't pay.
Well, let's talk about the violence. Because look, can we just touch on why we're having the violence? And I think Brian touched on it, and you did too.
Sure.
Look, we look at the children who are now were children then that are now adults.
Guys, I have to use a ladies' room. Keep going.
Okay, that are now adults. So the whole idea is that you have this group of young people who used to have a home and a community, and it was torn down. It was just in a day or two. I mean, they tore down the housing projects. I remember when I went to work in September, coming down State Street 1 week or 2 weeks, and then coming back and everything was gone. So within that short period of time, they demolished projects, they were really homes and communities and where children had support. And then they came and they shut down their schools. So then when they shut down their schools, they closed the projects down. Then they shut down their schools. And not to mention some of the very vicious policies that Mayor Daley had. For instance, if the incarceration of their parents. At that time, I remember going to court one day before the Daley administration. And if you were late or missed the court date, they would just give you another one. When Daley came in, if you missed the court date for some reason, you got a warrant for your arrest. So this started to happen to criminalize their parents. And then, of course, because of city parking, they would say, for instance, you're a young parent and you've got children who have to go to school, you have to go to work. You park your car outside. They would just ticket your car over and over and over again until you just couldn't afford it. And then you couldn't get to work and get around. So children saw their parents being incarcerated at ridiculous rates, their house being taken away from them, their schools being closed, even their cars being crushed by the city of Chicago, who had some very vicious policies when it came to poor Black people. And these are the children who grew up in that environment, learning the viciousness, learning. And I said, they learned how to be cruel, that no one cared, how to be vicious. So the violence is stemming from what they learned and what they were taught here in the city of Chicago, to be brutal.
Right.
And so as they grew up, then, now we have a population, and I really don't know how we're going to get it under control other than through reparations. We're going to have to equal the playing field for them.
It's going to take time.
This is where the violence is coming from, directly from the policies that have taken place over the last 20 to 30 years. And we have lost 2 generations of young Black adults here. It's the parents that have these children, and now this generation that is even worse off.
Yeah, 2 generations in here. Yeah.
And more violent.
And we're about to lose about probably 30,000. So there's a 34,000 people on the eviction list that the moratorium ends Saturday. And so 34,000 in Chicago, we could just assume that's 30,000 Black or 25,000 Black out of 34,000 in Chicago alone. That's going to start to gentrify these areas around Obama Center and places all over the city. So now we're gonna be moved out of the housing, and then they gonna come with some damn immigrant housing plans, and they gonna be moving all in. And that's why it's funny, because this is underway as we speak, and people are denying it, and that's what frustrates me. I'm like, look, we are under dire warning right now. You know, we all looked at we're familiar with the wealth gap studies from Sandy Darity or whoever, and they talk about the wealth gap, and then they talk about our zero wealth at 2050. And now you read that keeps moving. Quiet, it's now. It ain't 2050. They'd have moved that name like, hey, it's right now. And that's zero. Which people got to comprehend that.
And COVID expedited that.
Right. It wipes you out. It wipes you out. And we keep talking again. And I think, so, you know, to wrap it up to Rosita's point, the key is this is a culmination of decades of trauma and policies by government in Chicago. It's been all Democratic. And it's part for me, for us, if you don't know in Chicago, it's part of the same Democratic machine. So Rahm Emanuel was Mayor Daley's top fundraiser and a congressman here. He was also Barack Obama's chief of staff. When Rahm Emanuel came to be mayor, Mayor Daley's brother, who was the head of Chase Bank, remember what all them deals I'm talking about? This is global in Chicago. This is real. So then we got the chairman of Chase Bank going to be Barack Obama's chief of staff. I mean, it just wasn't playing around. You know what I mean? This is some real moves being made. Right. It's all at our dismay of ADOS nationwide, again, culminating in Chicago. It's just a culmination of bringing immigrants. I think it's real quick. It goes back to labor. We want to. We'd have been around too long. We asking for too much now. They don't need us no more. They're shifting it out. You have Asian immigrants coming in, and you have South American immigrants coming in for different purposes. They already have technology skills coming out of Asian, customer service skills. You have manufacturing coming out of China. You know what I mean? And so they're coming in with these skill sets, and our kids are not being taught that. So we can't compete. Our children, well, not my kids, but them too, and my grandkids won't be able to compete with what's coming this way because of the public school system's failure to put our kids in position to be educated to compete for jobs. They run us off into go play basketball while they teach other kids go do this. You know what I mean? So it's a lot. So,
but I mean, education has something to do with it, but very little. You got white high school dropouts more gainfully employed nationwide than college degree.
Oh, absolutely.
So all the education system is doing, if you're not putting your kids in colleges to learn entrepreneurship, they are finished. All they're going to be left with is the debt, like an albatross around their neck, like immigration, like white folks, like unemployment, like underemployment, like redlining, like preschool to prison pipeline, like the pandemic. All of these things are the albatross around our necks, and we are foolish if we don't guide our children in the direction of entrepreneurship to own what they do. Even if, say, for example, my daughter wants to be an orthodontist, if she ain't got her own practice, it's a wrap, because they're using our affirmative action to hire white women first, immigrants second, and LGBTQIA third. You have no social capital at these tables. I don't care how degreed you are. I don't care how diverse your background is. If we aren't in a position to hire each other, we are done.
I agree. And it has to be that our education system has to include entrepreneurship. I did it in the classroom every year I was there. I had children set up mock businesses, learn the stock market, and learn entrepreneurship, because I understood what you are saying. If we're not teaching them that, and we have no way in, our ancestors and our grandparents and even our parents, a lot of them were business owners. And when we came along, they said, get an education. But what they should have been telling us was get an education and make sure you have your own. Make sure you have, like you were saying, you get an education, but you always have a plan to have your own. Because otherwise,
hire your own. You got to be in a position to hire your own, because far too many of us are sold props by design of institutional systemic racism. They're not lending to us.
Right. They're not.
And they're trying to deny the reparations. So you must lean in. Another solution. I've been on calls with the Senate during our hearings. Now, I've been showing up for AB 3121, which is the commission to study repair out here, to, you know, and to vote for our ethnicity, for our own unique Black American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery. We need that distinction to put the gate up. So, my people, our coalition, our grassroots out here in California is working together. You guys probably see me promoting these calls because we need folks to call in. The reason why they're whooping our ass and taking names, we're not on those calls to weigh in on all the puck-ish. We're not on those calls. And so guess who shows up? The Asians, the Hispanics, the Indians, the white folks. And they are literally showing up to vote against our own interests. To your point, Rosita, because we were on that call about the ethnicity bill, they talked about these cities giving all these tickets on the Black folks who are illegally parked at the bus depot because ain't no parking. So they laden them with tickets, and now they want to start to put boots on their cars, remove the cars, all this kind of stuff, which makes it impossible for our people to bail these cars out of hock so they can get to work and continue to pay their rent. Well, because CJEC, the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, was on the line, waiting our turn, we were able to hear the puckery and weigh in and say, hell to the no. Y'all got to find another way, widen the streets, do whatever you got to do, but we know that this is going to disproportionately impact the ADOCS in those communities. That's not the way you do this. You got all our money. California is rich as cream. You find another way. It will not be on the heads as another albatross for our people who can't even, we've been neutralized economically, that we can't even afford a $500 emergency. So if you got all these tickets, before you could get your car at a hock, you got to pay all them tickets first. So y'all need to get with the coalitions, the grassroots who are on these city hearings. I know there's the Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. If you're in Chicago, you guys can list a few more. But the bottom line is, if we aren't at the table, we are on that menu. And they literally take the day off. Why? Because they can afford to. They take the day off to make sure they are on those calls to vote no to anything that benefits ADOCS, whether it's the yes portion of the call or the no portion. Them Asians are showing up in droves. And now that they've gotten rid of affirmative action down here for us, we couldn't even get Prop 16 passed to get us back included in some affirmative action down here in California. So what they're now doing is coming for affirmative action at a federal level. They are literally trying to make it a non-racial issue, as if race is finished in this country, when they know damn well the only way the boomers had to come up was because they had quotas. And now they want to get rid of quotas nationwide to finish ethnically cleansing us out this bitch. They want to make us fourth-class citizens, and they want to deny us the reparations we are owed in the trillions over multi-generations. So if y'all don't show up on those calls and get active locally, your people are done.
Okay. All right. And I did want to add too, when we look at jobs, even Teach for America, which is where they recruit young Ivy League, predominantly white kids to come into our poor Black communities and teach, so that they can, for 4 years, so they can get their loans paid off, student debt. So if you, it's a teacher induction program. So if you, and it's all over the country, but it started here in Chicago. So if you're white and you want to teach in the so-called Black community, you can come here for 4 years and teach our most at-risk children and you're not really an educator anyway, but you can teach them while you're learning how to teach. And so for 4 years, and then your student loan debt will be wiped out. Well, Teach for America refused to hire ADOS teachers, but they hired the DACA teachers. And so even people who were not citizens were able to come into our neighborhoods and teach our kids, but people who are of African American descent with doctorates and PhDs. These people had no experience, they have no certification. They're just coming in and learning how to teach on your child. And so they African American teachers, I've seen African American teachers with PhDs waiting on tables at the casino for a living because they've been fired. So this is the kind of brutal policies they have in Chicago. Very, very unfair, and it doesn't surprise, the violence doesn't surprise me. I'm just wondering why it isn't more, because of the way they've done people so badly here. They've created this group of very angry young people, and the young people don't have any respect for them. They don't have any respect for authority because they've seen the way that their parents and grandparents have been dogged, how their homes have been taken, how their schools have been knocked down, how they've been overly incarcerated while the property has been confiscated. And when you talk about driving, not only do they take the cars, young people would say you have to get to work. So if they ticket you and you drive without a license, now after a couple of times, it comes into a misdemeanor. Next thing you know, you got a felony because you were driving on a suspended license, because somebody over ticketed you. And once they get you in the system, it is so hard. Once they get their hands around your neck with a ticket or anything, and they overfine you, you just give up because you don't have the resources. I remember going into court and seeing them give fines to teenagers. They were like $10,000 fines, and the judge was saying, "And you come back in next month with $10,000." And I'm sitting there like, "Huh? Where's this kid gonna get $10,000 from?" These are the kind of, and the courts are all involved.
Yes,
It's
they are.
one big happy, all the systems are working together in unison, and it's all against African American ADOS people. Like you said, the preferred blacks are the foreign blacks, and I know that because I was married to one, and so I know all the stories white that they've told them about us, and they prefer them over us. So now you got that. You talk about the Africans coming in and thinking that they're better because now our people have struggled for 400 years, so and fought, so now they can come here and take advantage of everything that we have worked for, and them and the white people and the ones who, they're going to honor them, they're going to embrace them. They want them, they don't want you. And I
And why is
remember,
that? And why is that? Because they owe you.
yes,
Right.
They owe you 151 million each
right,
on the
right,
low end. That's why they don't want you. And we
right.
know what we're owed. And these immigrants come up in this piece, weaponizing their language against us, weaponizing their names against us. They are co-conspirators in our replacement, while they sit up here and throw rocks and hide their hands like, oh, the horror. You're such a xenophobe.
Right.
Because I call out the puckery. Anyway,
Right.
Brian.
Right. Exactly.
Well, we
You're
had
absolutely
in Illinois, we did a couple years ago before COVID, we did a bill in Springfield, in our capital, at the state level, and also in the city of Chicago to make us a protected class called ADOCS. We use the acronym, right? And it was in two different bills. So it created a protective class. What makes that important is when you talk about contracts. So again, when you talk about equity and it's all about economics, we could talk about all its sub issues But if we don't change the economic state of our people, we're going to stay the same, right? So again, we at about $80 billion when you look at the state, county, city budgets. We are different percentages. We 15% at the state level, 30% at the city level, right? So in addition to being named a protected class called ADOS, we also want to be pulled out of what's called minority. So you got minority set-asides, right?
Yeah.
Minority set-asides came out, of course, like everything else, for ADOS. That's what it came about. That's the premise of it. Everybody else gets in on it. Minority in Illinois means white women, Hispanics, Asians, and everybody else. The contracts I set up, just look how crazy this is, because this is how I fight about it all the time. Everybody's like, I'm crazy. Set asides at 25%. So what we're saying is we are accepting and allowing white men to get 75% of all contracts without nobody saying shit about it. We don't question it. You ain't got to get no certification. We ain't gonna ask you no questions. You could just have it. We know you got the capacity. You could just have it. And then you take this 25%, and everybody fighting all over the 25%, 25%, 25%, right? White women get 52% of the contracts of the 25%. So all that money go back to white women and the white households. And then they turn around and like, what's wrong with y'all poor black ADOS? Why can't y'all get together? I'm like, because you don't give us contracts. You don't give us sustainable wage jobs. As you all just mentioned, the state's attorney, the police, the courts, the jails, the sheriffs, and food services, Aramark, Chicago Public Schools, it's one big colluded effort of white folks and now immigrants to feed off of ADOS until we dead. And then we just go away. And it sounds crazy, but it's real. They are carnivores economically. Economically. That's what you say this, as I said this, every time Chicago police pays out about $400 million a year to overtime. And I keep trying to tell black folks, you are making those same white families that you hate richer because they the ones working overtime. I mean, think of that. They getting richer while hating us, and we mad and marching, and they go at home getting paid to their little white families enjoy their lives. Now, if that ain't diabolical, you know what I mean? It's
and
crazy.
not solving any murders, not just hey, just watching you kill yourself. And not solving any murders and just going to enjoy themselves on vacation with the money they make.
But that's because it is by design. Why do they have to now take up arms and be Derek Chauvin? Why would they have to go through that when they got us hating ourselves so much because we hate our conditions by design of institutional systemic racism? We've given our children nothing to live for. They have nothing to live for. And we have fires. It's a towering inferno, and we're being consumed.
Right.
And so voices like ours are being silenced in the process.
Exactly.
That's what's happening, but I got to keep showing up and speaking on it.
Right. And me too. And when we think about one thing I wanted to say before we close out, because we're working on a bill and being in the classroom, seeing what's wrong with what's going on, and we're working on a bill to deal with literacy for Black children, because one of the things that we know is that our children don't speak a standard English, and that's probably one of the issues when we look at academic achievement. So if I don't understand the standardized way in which tests are formulated and presented to me, I'm not going to do well on the tests. So what we have now is we have students failing because they actually need the same kinds of support that we give Hispanic children. When Hispanic children came over, the legislators created legislation that protected them. So even though they couldn't speak the language, you could not fail them. They wouldn't understand a single word you said, but you would have to pass them legally. You could not fail them in any instance. Now, on the other hand, we have never
gotten those concessions. They put us in the special ed classes and drug us up, and then create the not so new slavery in the prison preschool to prison pipeline.
And if you look at it, if our kids were being retained, if they didn't get special ed services, then they were retained. And I remember every year when I was teaching seventh grade, I would graduate children or students that were going to be 16. Now they're graduating out of seventh grade because they're too old to be in elementary school. And this happened every year. I had students graduating out of my seventh grade class going into high school at 16.
That
And
is
so what
unfathomable.
but on the other hand, the Hispanic children who couldn't speak English, they were legally protected. They never failed, even though they couldn't speak the language. In addition to that, they got additional language support, which means that if they were having difficulty, they've got this extra layer of support, which our students, I need that too. I read the legislation that they passed for the Hispanics, and then I said, our kids need this too. If they had this kind of additional language support, they would do very well. And then the other thing they did in the late 90s, they took grammar for the most part, not teaching that. They absolutely took spelling out of the curriculum, some of the phonics and penmanship. So now you have everything that's related to language arts being removed, and the justification of that was to say, oh, they have the internet. So the internet was spell check. The internet, that's what they told us when they came and got the spelling books out of the school. Now we know growing up spelling, if you can't spell, you can't read. So you will see that in the way our young people talk to each other, even on Facebook. They don't know how to spell. And then I was working at a
And
high school last year.
when you can't read, you can't comprehend. When you can't
Exactly.
comprehend, you are set up for the not so new slavery in the private prison industrial complex. Go ahead.
And there was a senior. I was graduating from a school that couldn't understand cursive. I would have to print because they stopped keep teaching cursive.
Yes, they
So our
have.
kids are going out and they don't understand cursive when you write in cursive. So these are all handicapped. So we're asking our legislators, just bring this back to the curriculum, give our kids a chance, give them the supports that they need so that they can articulate the English language so that they won't have this problem with success. And we have got to train our and I know it's a second language for us because we do speak a dialect of English, but we do have to train our kids how to be articulate and master how to speak the English language, because that will open up opportunity for them if they have to work in the system.
Okay,
So
but my
we're
question to
asking legislation for that.
my question is, do we continue to vote blue no matter damn who?
No,
What would
absolutely
what
not.
would you suggest?
I would suggest, I'm almost at the point where I have to vote and I may do a write-in, but I'm just sick of it. I voted my whole life. And I feel like after voting for the first Black president and seeing how badly we were treated, especially as educators, I literally voted for someone who took my job and my life away from me. So, that doesn't make me feel smart. It doesn't make me feel good. So I don't even know about the whole thing. I don't believe in political parties. We're at the point where whoever has something to offer the Black community anything, because we're not getting anything, if even then, that's who we need to vote for. And I also believe we need to everyday people just need to stand up and run for office. Stand up and run for. If you have an inkling where you think you could do better, run for political office. Um, and so I'm looking at someone saying what Dr. Claude Anderson was saying, yes, and also listen to the people, listen to Dr. King, read his speeches, listen to Malcolm X, become educated, because we don't have to keep reliving this nightmare over and over again. And as Brian said, our leadership changed. After Dr. King and Malcolm X, I remember growing up, and even as a child, I used to watch Dr. King and Malcolm X. And I remember feeling the void and saying, where is the Black organizing? Because after they left, our leaders turned and they flipped the script and they started, we had a whole Black agenda going.
They got paid to flip the script.
And they took us off course. And we haven't returned. We had a complete Black agenda. Our songs were about Black power. Our lives, our dress, everything we did was about Black power. And we were moving ahead like Curtis Mayfield, we're moving on up, and it was true. And then when Dr. King and then we got new leaders. And our new leaders said, okay, well, what about Black and brown? And then they started doing more advocacy for brown and left the Black. So that's why we're here.
It's all about the Benjamins. It's all about the Benjamins.
Yes, yes. So I'm hoping we can get together and do more of this because and get the word out and share. And I'm hoping everybody will share. Some of my people were saying they couldn't see, and I told them to go on YouTube. But I'm just really, we've got to do the hard work, and it is hard work, educating our people and trying to love them back to wellness because our people have been treated so badly in this country and our children are just running wild. And it's very painful to see. Yes, it's very painful.
How do my people reach you in Chicago to help with some of the heavy lifting with the legislation?
Okay, I'm at Cause Teachers, CAUSE. I have a Facebook page called Cause.
I'm sorry, CAUSE.
Yes, that's the acronym for Coalition and Alliance of Urban School Educators, Cause. So I have a Cause Facebook group and I have Cause Facebook pages. And you'll see the pages. I think there are 2 or 3 of them because I started and then I stopped. So there are plenty of cause information. I also have a website called Teach for the Future, and that's with the number 4, not the letter, for the letters 4. Teachforthefuture.org. And so if you go to my website, you'll see some of the things we do on behalf of our students. We are also, like I said, I'll be publishing my book, Drinking from the Whites Only Fountain. It'll be on Amazon very soon, within the next month. And this is the cover that I've designed for it. And so it's a very good read if you're interested in honoring educators and understanding the history of Black education. We're also, my new book will be coming out at Rainbow's End, dedicated to Chicago-style education organizing. And that will be out this year.
I'm trying to type. So teach the number 4. Could you give me that again?
Teach for the Future. All one word, teachforthefuture.org.
Okay, and the name of your book is called
Drinking from the Whites Only Fountain in the Era of the Obama Legacy. So, and I named it that because I talk about the feeling of African American educators, the desire that we had to just become educated. And becoming educated was that fountain that we decided to drink from. What happens when you drink from the white only fountain? There's a penalty because we were never brought here to be educated. We were never brought here to teach or to be taught. So when we drink from that fountain, then there are consequences to that. And those consequences were giving up your seat. It's like I said in my book, I talk about what it feels like when all the Black teachers were fired. It's like we were on the back of the bus. We had to go to the back of the bus and give up our seats to the young white teachers and young white others that came in, even though we had 20 years of service and double masters and PhDs, we had to give our jobs up to some people that didn't even have an education degree. and no one said a word about it. And we fought and we fought. Our unions threw us under the bus. Our Black community threw us under the bus. We had nowhere to go. And people say, well, why didn't you do this? And why didn't we had no support? We're doing this interview here with you, even in Chicago. We can't even get the Chicago Black media to cover this story adequately. The only person that ever helped us was a young man on WVON by the name of Philip Jackson. He would have us on all the time. And when he passed away, his show still on, but they won't call you. They won't interview you. They won't even help you to get your story out. So we'd have to go to people in other parts of the country to talk about this issue. And it's ridiculous.
Well, the thing is that, as like I said, what's happening to Blacks in one city state is happening to Blacks all over the country.
Yes.
And that's why I reach across the country to bring on extraordinary guests like you, because you let us see the big picture. Yeah. And it's not just me ringing the alarm about the puckery in California. I need for folks to understand this is happening to ADOCS, American descendants of chattel slavery, all throughout the country. And we need all hands on deck. You can reach me at, I can't give you my Facebook. Like I said, I've got to be real stealth about who I invite onto those circles, because many of the people that tried to befriend you are just like the Black niggerati. They're going to report to Facebook the things I say and paint me out to be homophobic when I call out the gay agenda, how they're weaponizing Little Nas X and this music against our boys to make them girls so we don't procreate. Right. They like to call me a conspiracy theorist when I talk about the pandemic and how this government is lying to you about what's really going on. In one breath, they say 97% of the hospitalizations are COVID vaccinated. And then in the next, they're telling you that 97% are the unvaccinated and those who took one vac. And then they're ending the eviction moratorium, which is going to disproportionately impact ADOCS throughout the entire country, all the while pretending to give a damn and giving away Krispy Kremes on a daily basis, weed, and reduced prison sentences if you get both jabs. So I get called a conspiracy theorist when I talk about that. They don't want me talking about the current administration, Biden and Cop Obama. They don't want me talking about that. They don't want me talking about the Black immigrants and other immigrants being weaponized against ADOCS to replace us in the classrooms, to replace us in our communities, to replace us in small business, to replace us in home ownership, to replace us to replace us in education, to replace us in political office, to replace us professionally. That's when they label me a xenophobe. And all of it culminates to make me a Black identity extremist. So I can't publicly share where to find me on Facebook for that reason. I lost 4,500 subscribers as a result. I am in the process. Please visit my website of moving all my content over to my own website where I cannot be censored. In other words, I'm becoming my own damn Patreon. So visit me at therepperspect.com, therepperspect.com. Sign my email list so that you will know via email when either of these platforms that we do not own decide to neutralize my voice. You will still be able to find me over on therepperspect.com. I'll type it in the chat.
Okay.
But I'm thankful to you guys. Yes, I took a time out because of all the puckery. I'd gone to Hawaii with my daughter to celebrate her 17th birthday. And I didn't want to come off that high. I just wanted to stay in a Hawaii state of mind. And it's a lot of puckery over there too with the Hawaiians. But that's not my monkey, not my circus. I've got one albatross, and that's reparations and a Black agenda and weaponizing our vote and socializing our stuff. My focus with a one-track mind is ADOCS, FBAB1, ADOCS, whatever you want to call it. We all bleed ADOCS, okay? That is my focus. So please, I thank you so much, Rosita. We are almost at 2 hours. I thank you for being a guest. We will have you back, especially when your book is out. I want to bring you on so we can get the people over there purchasing your book in droves.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I think Brian had to leave, but yes, I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much to everyone that tuned in. And please share it and continue to share it so we can all find out what's going on all across the country with ADOS people.
Amen to that. And with that said, family, I want to pray the prayer of protection over us that.
Amen.
When does that book drop? Oh, when does a book drop? Brian's asking.
In about 4 weeks. I just talked to my publisher today. They said about 4 weeks, and it'll be on Amazon and some of the bookstores.
Wonderful. And if you want to join this fight for our people, please, you can also email me at thereperspect@gmail.com. Okay. With that said, family, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever ADOCS and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. Until next time, family, I can't tell you when that'll be because I'm not on that Monday through Thursday train. It's just team too much. Until I see you again, you make it a beautiful, God-inspired rest of your evening. Know that I love you Black and I love you strong. Peace. Good night.
Peace. Good night.